Hello, everybody, and welcome to the very first episode of the Dragon Prince podcast. My name is Will. I'm here with my co-host, James.
Hello.
And let's get right on into it. So just some general housekeeping before we get into this jam-packed episode. This is, the beginning. This is the very first one.
We're going to look back at it and hate it.
I know. That's always what happens, for sure. If you're here, you probably are familiar with the Dragon Prince, the new show on Netflix. We're very excited about it. Communities like Avatar: The Last Airbender and The Legend of Korra, and having a lot of that core team involved with this show, we're very, very excited to get going on the ground running with this. So today we have a full episode full of post-panel discussion because at San Diego Comic-Con, we just had the very first panel for the Dragon Prince. So we have a special guest on talking a little bit about that. And, we have a great episode to just launch this show. Before we get into that, though, let's just do a little bit of background on us so the audience comes to love us or hate us, whichever you prefer.
Yeah, I'm going to be the hated one.
James, definitely the bad cop in this situation from the Fire Nation for sure. All right, so let's just explain who you are and what you're about.
Yeah, well, my name is James, and I've been a fan of Avatar: The Last Airbender since it came out on Nickelodeon. And a big fan of animation in general. Anything from anime to Western animation to from big budget to small budget. I love animation. What really draws me is the stories you can tell through it. And Avatar: The Last Airbender told one of the best stories on television. I'm excited to see the work from the head writer come to a new show.
For sure. And yeah, my name is Will, and I've been enjoying animation for a while now. Like, I grew up with Pokemon. That was my first big exposure, and have since branched out into things like Avatar: The Last Airbender. I was really attracted to it because of the amazing storytelling and how it really was a kid's show, but had a lot of amazing themes that anybody of any age could enjoy. So that's what's drawing me to this show in particular as well. And just starting a podcast at the very beginning of a new exciting fandom has me excited as well. And the community is already super cool, super strong. So I'm looking forward to that. Now, before we get into our panel discussion, we're recording this beforehand. What expectations do you have going into this panel?
Well, I'd obviously love to see a trailer. Like a full blown out story trailer. We got like a little bit of snippet from like the press release before, but we don't know anything about these characters and who they are and what the Dragon Prince even means. Like, what does that title entail? I'm skeptical that we'd get a full episode or something like that, but hey, a guy can dream.
That's for sure. And basically what we have is this amazing poster art, and we have the description, which is actually really good and does a lot of things. And I'll just take a look at that real quick. We're basically focusing on the piece of information that we have is that we have two princes that are being hunted down by an elven assassin, and they must go on an epic quest to save their warring lands. So as we see, we have the perspective of these princes, probably coming from immense wealth, power, and privilege. We have an elven assassin, so we're introduced to another race that is initially trying to hunt them, but then befriends them. So that'll be an interesting, conflicting story. Really looking forward to seeing. And then we have saving their warring lands. So that means they're going to go on an adventure, and we're going to see a lot of awesome stuff. So I expect some world building from this.
One thing that Avatar did really well was creating a world that was both very fantastical, but also very believable, with the stories they told about the human characters within it. Of course, they could all move rocks and do whatever, but it was at the core a story about a group of kids that were doing their best to save the world. That's just what I hope from this too.
And that's the best part about any storytelling, whether it's Star Wars, Harry Potter, whatever it is. At the root of it is a good story. And then you have all these fantastical elements that heighten that sense of reality, but doesn't take away from those core themings of, love, friendship, adventure, things like that. So before we get into the panel discussion, just briefly here, we talked on some of the things we're expecting to see. Is there anything that has you concerned or something that is a flag to you now?
Nothing jumps out at me as being like overly concerning, but we don't have a whole lot of information. I'm interested to see how they will release the episodes, if it's all at once or if it's over a serial the way it was with Avatar.
For sure, because one of the things in terms of fandom is we can look at Korra, for example. there was a big gap between some of the seasons, like a year and a half, if I remember correctly. And I think that was tough on the fandom. They didn't have a lot of stuff to talk about after the first couple months, and then it became like a waiting game. So Netflix traditionally releases things all at one time, binge watching style, but we do have shows on Netflix coming out like Riverdale. But again, that's episodic week to week, and that's because it's rooted on the CW, where this through the new studio that they've set up, Wonderstorm, I believe it's called. They have a deal exclusively with Netflix. So is it going to be bingeable? Is it not? So basically, from what I'm getting from your perspective, James, is that you would prefer it to be more week to week?
I would like it to be week to week, or give it enough rewatchability that you can, like something like The Office, you can just sit down, pop on any episode and enjoy it. We have 6 hours of content when it first drops, and then we get nothing for a year and a half. It hurts the fandom, and it hurts people like us who like discussing things, and it hurts its rememberability.
So, that's it. We'll talk a little bit more at the end of the episode about some of the future plans we have, but let's get right on into the panel discussion. Everybody, we just had the most amazing time going through the live panel discussion at San Diego Comic-Con, and we're going to do a little bit of a post-panel debrief here, talking about everything that happened, all the excitement, all the things that we saw and heard about. And I have a guest, a very special guest. You may follow them on Twitter at Dragon Prince Fan. We have EG here. Introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm EG. I run Dragon Prince Fan. I've been following several of the people working on the staff for the Dragon Prince for years on their other projects, so I just want to go ahead and jump on this and support them and try to promote what they're doing.
For sure. That's awesome. So today was the much coveted day because it was the kind of first media type thing we have from the creators of the Dragon Prince. We were expecting some things, but we got a lot. Just briefly to overview everything. We got introductions. We were announced to some of the voice cast that we're going to talk about a bit later on. And then we got a full episode that was aired, and then some Q&A afterwards. Let's just start with your initial reaction to this whole thing. What were you expecting going in? And now that it's all said and done, what are your initial afterthoughts?
I'll admit I was expecting a different style of the 3D animation, but I think I'm going to be happy with what they're doing. Storyline wise, I didn't really have a lot of expectations. I think the 6 different types of magic are going to be interesting, and I don't know. There's a lot of potential in what they've set up with that intro.
Mm-hmm. Very much so. Yeah, I was excited to see the animation style as well. The cel-shaded CG is a very interesting way to go. And the storyline, I just remember like a few weeks ago when we got just the brief hook or like one-liner about what the show would be. I was really intrigued because we have a lot of these interesting dynamics at play. We have these princes, which is like interesting. We have like this elven assassin, and we have like a warring homeland. So we have 3 different things that are all going to come into play, and how are they going to set those things up and how are they going to intermingle is really interesting. And we know that we're going to see a lot of world building and some awesome character development too. So a lot of that was pushed today.
Oh, absolutely. And it's going to be an interesting thing to have. You've got the 2 princes apparently are 2 different races, or at least showing different aspects of being biracial. And we've got the elves with the horns, which I haven't seen done before.
Mm-hmm, for sure.
And obviously, since I don't think either of us were there live, we saw mention of in the live blog that there was some sort of ceremony and oath to get the bracelet. But I'm wondering if the horns appeared then, because since it was part of their binding to get vengeance over the Dragon King's death.
Yes. Yeah, that's interesting.
Since we didn't have that visual, we don't know.
Yeah, exactly. And just anybody who didn't catch the panel yet or haven't seen, weren't there obviously, basically they set up the story for us in this episode. Essentially there's 6 different types of magic or ways to use it. Humans found dark magic, obviously you know where that goes, it goes bad, and then we're pitted elves and dragons versus humans, and the humans started trying to wipe out like the Dragon King. So now we have these 2 kind of warring or hostile sides in a fight, and we're kind of seeing already in the first episode how they interact with each other, the hostilities around it, and how that's going to create some conflict in the show.
Yeah, and it's going to be very interesting, I think, to get to have the humans kind of as the bad guys here.
Yeah.
And someone asked about that specifically, with referencing, since we've got so many people from the Avatar: The Last Airbender crew, whether or not it was like watching Avatar from the side of the Fire Nation, and that they were the bad guys. And I think it was, I don't remember if it was Justin or Jake that responded saying that, or Giancarlo that said that they were looking at it from the perspective of showing there's bad and good in every culture.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that's really realistic. And they talked about, too, that I know a fan asked about, do we have something as distinct and evil as the Fire Nation? And they kind of retorted with, there are goods and bads to everybody in every culture. So you're going to see more of a gray kind of overall tone. And I think that's going to introduce a lot of interesting story plots in this show. Now, to talk about one of the first big kind of announcements was that we have some returning voice acting individuals from Avatar: The Last Airbender coming in and voicing characters on this show. Do you want to just talk a little bit about that?
I know they announced we've got Sokka's voice actor is returning.
Jack
Desena, or Desena?
Yeah, something like that.
And he's going to be voicing the Elder Prince Callum. That'll be neat. And you've got a character that, at least from what I was seeing in that live blog, who everyone was questioning when Aaron Ahaz made the announcement that, wait, he's the older prince, but he's not the crown prince.
Right.
And with such a visible difference between the boys, that it raises a lot of questions. Also, the live blog kept talking about how he was more interested in drawing than doing any of the other things he was supposed to be doing at any given point in those early scenes.
Yeah, and we're already seeing right now, they're setting up some of the three of the main characters, Rayla, Ezran, and Calum, as kind of different. We have somebody who's more interested in the arts and the creative. We have somebody who, Ezran's like more into sword fighting, and then Rayla is, I actually am the most interested in right now because of her interaction with the human.
Right. Rayla's introduction was really interesting because she's clearly attacking the castle, but the moment somebody begged for their lives, she backed off, and that actually got them in trouble later, because the person was clever enough to use the moths to locate them. Now, I'm not sure, from the live blog, it was a little confusing. Was it Ezran that was doing the sword fighting? Because I got the impression Ezran was off goofing around with his glow frog with the bakers.
Oh,
and what it was, Callum wasn't interested in doing the sword fighting up until the sword master's sister showed up, and all of a sudden he wanted to impress her, so Zoran and Callum like staged Zoran losing a fight to him.
Right. So we're getting our first little samples of romance here, which is funny.
They look very young, so it's just cute crushes, you know?
For sure. And this will be interesting too, because as we know, we don't know really what's going to happen with this show. We suspect it will be successful, but it'll be interesting to see the characters, if it has a long enough life, grow up on screen, similar to how we've seen even like Aang grow up on screen and other characters.
And knowing this crew, they've got plans for it if they can get it that far.
For sure. And let's talk about that a little bit. It was mentioned here at this panel, but it's something that I mentioned at the top of the episode. One of the big problems, I guess, with when we got to The Legend of Korra was at a certain point, we feel that it was stifled because of Nickelodeon and kind of their treatment towards that show, and how they basically, for lack of a simpler term, let it die almost online. And there was some development problems. Now that we have, this is a different show, of course, and not everybody is the same, but we have a show that's coming out on Netflix. Netflix has been known to allow creators of content on their platform to really explore things in their own way. So do you think, because of that and what the comments were made on this panel of basically echoing just what I said, we're going to expect darker storylines potentially, more in-depth looks at things that were almost taboo for Nickelodeon?
I think so, but I don't think it's necessarily going to be darker, but I think we're going to see more complex things approached. But I do think there is going to be this aspect of where they want to do something dark, they will actually go all the way and do something dark.
Mm-hmm.
Because we're back when Giancarlo was doing Green Lantern, I know that one of the things that he talked about was that occasionally he would have liked to do some of the deaths on screen instead of off screen, but you couldn't because network requirements more so than anything else.
Yeah.
For shows within a certain age range. I don't know how Netflix handles that, but I mean, they mentioned specifically that they'd been frustrated that they couldn't definitively kill Jet because of those same network restrictions that aren't just any one particular show. It's like a general network television issue of you can't kill people on screen in a TV show.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think we're going to get something very bloody, but we are going to get more actual tragedy, and it's going to be very definite and happening on screen for us.
Right, for sure. And let's segue that into one of the biggest things that I think that we can take away from this panel. I tweeted it out, obviously, and it's got a ton of response so far. During the Q&A portion, somebody in the audience asked about LGBT representation in the show. And the panel said that they're not going to give any info yet because it could be potentially spoiler. And that has led to a major blow up online in terms of positivity. I'm seeing tweets like, finally a definitive answer without spoilers. Nice, I approve. I love this. Thank you for telling us straight away. I'm super excited for it to be released. Amongst other replies just on my tweet, we are getting GIFs. We're getting, all of this reaction to it. How do you feel about the answer that the panel gave? And do you think it's a little bit deeper and more complex than what they said?
I suspect it's going to be deeper and more complex than what they said because an answer either yes or no is a spoiler. And I think I really admire that enthusiasm that everyone's got. And I really hope they do have LGBT representation. But I just kind of want to caution people that, we can't tell you because it's a spoiler, because it might be a spoiler. No would have been a spoiler too. And I don't want people getting overexcited and then getting disappointed if it's not there. Obviously, I hope it is. I mean, I'm part of the community myself. I'd love to see it.
Yeah, no, I agree. And, in recent years, we've definitely seen some good developments, as late as like when it happened in Korra, The Legend of Korra. We finally, after much coveted fan interest, we got more representation. But it would be nice in this show to see a little bit more built out and more of a through line throughout the show.
And just a sec before you continue, and even then, Korra got blowback because they didn't get to do the kiss on screen. It had to happen in comics after the fact. They only got to hold hands.
Yeah. And
I'm worried that and there were a lot of arguments up until the follow-on comic came out that whether or not it was actually them getting together.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I so want this, but at the same time, I'm trying to temper my expectations, and I want to temper everyone else's expectations that way too.
For sure. And
because we just got off the Voltron panel yesterday, which they made that wonderful announcement about Shiro, but they also, and I don't know if it's from Netflix or we don't know if it was from Netflix or from DreamWorks that was the pushback because they had that planned since season 2. But, potentially it could be just as hard to fight, even if they do want to do the LGBT rep, that it could be just as hard to fight to get it in there and actually on the screen.
That's true. I feel like I lean towards it potentially happening because Netflix does have a lot of shows that do represent it in a lot better way than what you would see on network television per se.
Oh, they really do.
And I'm very positive about that. But yeah, I think we need to temper those expectations. Wait until a little bit more content comes out. And
Absolutely.
One thing that I did notice is they actually said more about representation of ethnicity in the show. They followed up by saying that the creators really want to have a lot of representation, especially regarding ethnicity and at least ethnic traits that are visible, and they worked very hard and paid close attention to add ethnic diversity, as we see in some of the main characters even.
Oh yeah, the princes and the king, like just them alone is going to be great representation for kids.
Mm-hmm. Another thing that I think we can take a look at when the trailer is out, so if you haven't viewed it, the official Dragon Prince Twitter, as well as IGN and a few other places have it, and there'll be even more by the time this episode comes up. This show is going to be great for kids, for sure, but like Avatar and a lot of other shows, I think you're going to find a really interesting demographic of adults like ourselves and other individuals watching it, and I think that's the best way to go.
These people, I think they're going to just give us something that, sorry, hold on. Let me pull up a quote I want to reference real quick. With this crew, like we said, we know from Avatar: The Last Airbender, they're good at making stuff that's very much, while it's a kid's show, it's still going to have depth and appeal to an older audience, but you bring it up reminded me of a quote from Giancarlo Volpe back when he was they were just starting up Green Lantern, the animated series 6 years ago. And he made a quote about his approach to making shows. And I'm hoping this is going to be relevant now, even though it's 6 years later. You have to know that my approach to making shows is to make shows with mass appeal. The goal is to tell a very intelligent, well thought out story that holds up for adults, and then sprinkling comedy here and there for kids. You have to tone it down, sex and violence, so it's safe for a 5-year-old, of course. I think where a lot of action shows go wrong is they approach it from the complete opposite vantage point. They make a frivolous, goofy story that they think kids will like, then try to sprinkle in an occasional grown-up joke or reference to wink at the adults. The problem with that thinking is that if the show is crap, the parents you're catering to won't even be in the room to hear your lame 80s pop culture joke.
Mm-hmm.
So that approach of making a solid story and then toning it down to be friendly to all audiences is a very different approach. And I think it's what made the difference between, your average kids show on Cartoon Network and Avatar: The Last Airbender and Green Lantern. It just made the difference in that storytelling.
100%. I agree. And yeah, that's definitely a better ideology to approach it, for sure. All right, let's take a look at some of these questions. We got a few questions for the podcast here. Let me just pull them up. Okay, the first question is from Jolise, I believe I'm pronouncing it right, at Lodo Buns on Twitter. What do you think of Mage Calum being canon?
Oh, I think that's going to be really exciting, especially since we know that the humans are the ones that created dark magic when there had only been 6 types of magic before, and that was what caused this initial entire rift and the war.
Mm-hmm.
It's possible. It makes you wonder. It didn't look like dark magic, but we don't know what dark magic looks like in this universe. So, is he using dark magic, and is that going to be a sticking point with their potentially friend Rayla? Or is he actually branching out into those original 6, and is that something new for humans to do? Another thought is, if he's a mage, is that the reason why the elder prince is not the crown prince?
Ooh, yeah, that's interesting as well. And I think all of these things could potentially come into play for sure in the upcoming season and seasons for sure. I like this train of thought. So
yeah, because I'm just thinking, if there's all this strife and basically war because of the humans developing dark magic, if one of the princes is born and he has a natural affinity for magic, that's just asking for the war to continue. You'd never get peace. Agreed
for sure. So Jolise, I'd like to know what you think as well. So definitely following this episode, leave a comment down below, and we can continue this discussion for sure. And the next question we have here is from Zay at Tier Junie on Twitter. This question, I don't know if we'll be able to give you a definitive answer, but we'll talk about it anyway. Is there a planned episode season number like there was with Avatar: The Last Airbender or The Legend of Korra? Not that I can see right now anything confirmed, right?
Yeah, I haven't seen anything announced, but at this point, my assumption would be it seems the standard starting count for a new animated series from Netflix is 13 episodes. We may get a double or triple episode for the first episode. I think in general, we're going to see about the equivalent of 13 episodes.
Right. Now, do you think this is something that I was always interested in too, because it is Netflix. When they release, are they going to release all at once for binge watching, or are they going to follow more of like a Riverdale model where it's like released weekly?
The end of the trailer said all episodes will be available on September 14th.
Okay, so there we
We
have
should
it.
get all of them at once.
Yeah, how do you feel
And-
about something like that, as opposed to more episodic week to week?
In part, it depends on the storytelling. If the storytelling is done in such a way that it works fine to binge it, that's great. But also, I kind of hate it a little bit, just
Mhm.
because the pressure to binge, to keep up, to keep from being spoiled is just massive. And that's, with 13 episodes, you're looking at about 6 hours sitting. You've got to find 6 hours out of your day to, sit down and catch up.
Agreed. And from a fandom perspective, I find that always difficult because you get a lot of the initial conversation, a lot of discussion and everything around it when it begins, but it very slowly dies down, and then it becomes a waiting game for a year or however long it is
Mhm.
for the next season. And I worry about that, especially in terms of an animated show, because it takes a lot of time, a lot of craft and skill to come up with these episodes and make sure that they're right. And
Oh yeah, and animation stuff between, going from writing to the storyboarding to animation to voice acting and doing the final cuts, you look at usually a year or more of lead time between when we see an episode and when it's initially being created.
mhm.
And I don't know if enough fans understand how much lead time goes in. And
Yeah.
that is the downside of this binge culture, this binge watching culture, is that if they haven't already been approved for a larger episode count, we could be seeing a very long space between that first clutch of episodes and the next set.
Yeah.
And with Wonderstorm being a brand new company, they may not have gotten that larger contract like, say, DreamWorks can pull.
Right, exactly. And I think we already have some foresight into what happened last time. Like with Legend of Korra, there was a period between seasons where it ended up being more than a year, and people started getting a little bit angry. People started speaking out against Nickelodeon, and tensions got a little bit high because it was taking so long. So I think that could be a potential problem for this show. So
Absolutely.
we'll have to wait and see, though. I'm cautiously optimistic about it, but it's something that we'll definitely be keeping an eye on.
Right. Yeah, I definitely hope and want the best for this.
Yeah, 100%. Now we have another question here that just came in from Leo. I think I'm saying that right. And he is asking, what kind of relationships do the elves have with the dragons? Do you want to take a first stab at that?
Well, based on what we were hearing from that live blog, it sounds like the elves and the dragons, at least after the humans created the dark magic, they became close allies to try to fight against the humans. Now, with the Dragon King dead, we didn't see the elves interacting with the dragons again. I don't know if the Dragon King being dead and his egg being dead means all the dragons are gone, or just the king, and how the dragons reacted to that. That might have broken that allyship a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
or alliance a little bit, but I don't know. It's hard to tell. We didn't get any information to that effect.
Yeah, we don't know if like the dragons are hiding away, if they're all extinct and gone. So I think we're waiting.
I mean, it looks like the elves are still loyal to them, at least to some degree, or at least
For
some
sure.
subset of them are. And again, I keep going back to, why do the elves have horns? Because is such a specific visual choice to make.
Mhm.
I keep thinking that's going to tie back into the alliance with these dragons somehow.
I agree. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see how that works. And one of the coolest parts about shows like Avatar or Legend of Korra, or even things like Harry Potter or Game of Thrones, is the sense of alliances or families or groupings of people and how they interact, and almost like the politics around that and the fun and games around that. So it'll be interesting to see as we go along with the show how these different these elves, these dragons, the humans,
Mhm.
and whether or not there are more races or individuals out there, how they all interact with each other.
Right. Yeah, they didn't mention that the six types of magic are split between six different races, but that would be the natural assumption. So I'm wondering if we're going to see more races
Right.
associated with each magic type.
That's interesting as well.
We could even get a journey of like, if Callum's a mage, is he going to end up wanting to go to each of these different cultures to try to learn more of each of these different types of magic?
And that feels like it could be a very natural story point, like plotting wise. That would give you a lot of content, and it would be able to help the show world build and show a lot of different areas, because we don't know a lot about the world really.
And that forces us to travel.
Yeah, 100%. And not only are we going to probably see different like biomes and areas, we're going to see different types of architecture and individuals that go along with that most likely. So that'll be very interesting as well. So that was a great question, Leo. Thank you. And I think that's all of them that we have right now. Just to wrap out this segment, to end it, now that this is done, we have the trailer. What do you think's next? What do you think we should be seeing next? What's expected?
I think we're going to start seeing some more announcements of voice actors and putting some names and such to that. I think we'll start seeing some of the I think we'll see more art from the crew, like official art in the animation style. I also expect we're probably going to get an announcement about a video game.
Ooh.
Because the Wonderstorm, a bunch of animation experts and video game experts that were working at Riot ended up getting together, and they went off to start this Wonderstorm studio. And the goal was, it's a story and play studio.
Yeah.
And so the entire concept is that they want to tell these epic animated stories, but they also want to do video games that are connected to them. And rather than have, I don't know if you ever played the games for Avatar: The Last Airbender, but they were bad.
Yeah.
They were completely disconnected. They at times contradicted the actual content of the TV show. And so you've got a studio that's actually focused on integrating that as both are being developed. So
that's very interesting. And
they haven't officially announced a video game yet, but knowing that studio that's what it was started up with the intention of doing. And that if you go and look at their website and look at their careers section, they are hiring UX designers, game developers, environment engineers to create a video game. And it looks like it's going to be connected to the Dragon Prince.
Interesting. Yeah, I agree with that, because I think that's one of the biggest pitfalls of most fandoms. Like, you have these great shows or movies and book series that people follow. And then when it comes time to create video games, a lot of them are really
or to branch out to anything, like the comic books, the little side, character guides. There's no communication happening between the people writing the story and the people making the side content.
So if you have a full 360 approach where you're doing a lot of it in-house, or at least the people that are making the decisions about these different things and these different mediums are all in the same
room, talking to each other, and they have a single story director, I think you're going to see a higher quality of content come out. For sure.
Actually, I got another question here. Let's talk about this. We kind of touched on it, but we can discuss a little bit more. Audrey Ross asks, is there a reason why Ezran is the crown prince and not Calum? So this is an interesting question as well. We kind of hinted at it, but I don't know if we necessarily know.
We don't know at this point. There's a lot of potential answers. We talked about, maybe him being a mage is a factor, but it could be a lot of things. He could be adopted. He could be a half sibling from a prior queen, and with a new queen, and when a new queen was instated, there's politics in royalty, and maybe something happened. For all we know, with his lack of interest in the sword fighting and his interest in drawing, it's possible he just chose to abdicate. It could have been a completely peaceful thing, of him going, I don't feel I'm suited for this. I have no interest in learning this. I'm not doing it. I'm abdicating, so it goes next down the line.
Right. And I think that'll be an interesting plot point in the series as it develops. If he is indeed, as the eldest, not the crown prince.
That could depending on what the reason is, it could either be a sore point between the brothers. Either way, if he chose to give it up in some fashion, that puts a lot of pressure on his little brother, who doesn't seem to necessarily be the bravest, because we saw him being scared of a thunderstorm in the opening sequence. Or it could be he didn't willingly give it up and maybe resents Ezran a little bit. You can love your sibling and still resent them for things they get that you don't.
Exactly. And that creates, I think, interesting storytelling too. So that's something that we definitely will keep an eye out on. We have another question here from Stardad. They ask, is there any characters you're particularly excited about seeing play out on screen?
I will admit I am really excited about Rayla.
I am too.
I'm excited to have our warrior character be a woman or a girl. We don't know what ages we're dealing with.
Mm-hmm. No, I agree. I like, just based off of what we know and what we've seen in this first episode, the fact that she gave mercy to this human character, and it led to her getting in trouble, and that kind of dichotomy between the elves and the humans, that she's hesitant of that. I want to see that grow, and I want to see where that's going, and I feel like she's going to be the most interesting character at bridging the cultural understanding of the elves and the humans, and allowing us to see the perspective of both of these individual races.
Yeah, she has so much potential to just give us such a view into the world, especially, like, I suspect some princes living in a castle haven't seen that outside world too.
Yeah.
So she'll bring that into their lives, of understanding what they may not realize what the humans did, being so young and being sheltered. And she's probably going to open their eyes to a lot.
100%.
But also, yeah, just her story arc on its own, of she's got to have some amazingly divided loyalties going on.
Yeah, and that'll be great. I think that'll be one of the best storylines for sure. Thank you, everybody, for the question on Twitter. Feel free to keep on asking, and then we'll hop on online and continue to answer some questions and have a discussion with the community. That's honestly the best part. Make sure you check out the trailer and follow everybody on Twitter for more information. And thank you for coming on. Do you want to plug any of your social media?
If you can, follow me at Dragon Prince Fan on either Twitter or Tumblr. My goal is just to be a central point to share fan works, theories, as long as everyone's being nice and playing nice and sharing news. Just want to be a good central point for people to go and find out more about the show.
That's awesome. And yeah, thanks for coming on. This will be regular. We'll hopefully have you back on
I'd love to.
Future as we discuss and dive deeper into the show. So yeah, thanks everybody. Awesome. So we just finished the panel discussion with our special guest from Twitter at Dragon Prince Fan. Now I'm back with my co-host James, just
Hello.
to do a quick debrief with him on his thoughts before we wrap out the episode. So overall, James, what did you feel coming out of this panel? We set up our expectations at the beginning of the episode. Now we saw the panel. What was it like for you? I
just want to say, your boy called the full episode in the panel. Holler at me.
Kind of.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No. I do what I can. Next, I'm going to say we're gonna get 4 seasons, and they're going to give us 4 seasons all at once.
We'll hold you to that.
Yeah. I thought it was really, really good. I really enjoyed the trailer they put out. I love the art style. It's different from what we've seen before with Avatar: The Last Airbender. It kind of reminds me of the couple episodes they did with the first Avatar. They had 2 episodes that was a different art style, and that looked really good. Of course, this is cell shaded 3D models. I think it will lend itself well to the environment they're building. Right. And we're introduced to we weren't there, but we heard into the panel through a live stream or a live tweet what was going on in that episode. And there was a lot of world building. There was a lot of introduction to characters. We're introduced, I think, to our 3 major characters in Callum, Ezran, and Rayla. What are your opinions so far on our limited knowledge of them? I enjoy the way they've set the characters up. It's interesting to see, like, as we learn more about their backstory. I'm not sure how I feel about the only girl being from like the other race, but I'm sure they'll do something with that, or do an episode on like gender or whatnot, which is, will help us understand what it's like to be a female or a different race in this world they're building.
Right.
And we've already seen that there's huge disputes between the two races.
No, and that's the interesting thing. You're right. The highlight, I think, for a lot of people is that Rayla is a female warrior character, and that's very popular, and that's great. And I think, Aaron Ehas and a lot of the creative team have strong backgrounds making complex, interesting female characters. So I'm very confident that this character will be good. Also, the fact that we already see a little bit of conflict with her in terms of the fact that she is in a situation and gives mercy to a human and then later gets in trouble for that. So we're, through her eyes, getting a look deeper into the elven culture, which I think is really going to be the funnel, the surrogate for that. So that's interesting. In terms of the world building, the 6 different types of magic, the dark magic, the fact that we have humans, dragons, and elves. What do you think about that so far?
I'm cautiously optimistic that they won't go too overboard with magic and magic use, because there's a big power creep with that kind of stuff. If one of the kids has an avatar state and they never use it, you can see stuff like that being a problem. But I'm excited. If there's 6 different kinds of magic, that means there's a whole bunch of different storytelling options for the crew.
Yeah.
And the more stories they can tell, the more I can get invested in their world building.
Mm-hmm.
Great show.
Because and there's so many things that we don't know, because what we can see is that Calum is a magic user based off of the trailer and based off of the first episode reactions. So does he know all of these different types of magic? It doesn't look like it's dark magic. Are these 6 different kinds of magic used by 6 different kinds of races or 6 different types of people? So I think we're going to see an adventure. We're going to go see travel. We're going to see different biomes, different environments, different places and people. So I'm interested in seeing that. On the other side of things, with the panel, outside of the episode, we got in a Q&A. And one of the big things was the question around representation, diversity, things of those likes. And while I was live tweeting this panel, one of the tweets that blew up for us is the fact that the creator said that LGBT representation in the Dragon Prince will come, but they didn't specifically say what, because they don't want to spoil it yet. So for this community, it's obviously been, and for a lot of communities, the representation is important to see on screen. We even see it in the diversity of the 2 princes. They look like they're of kind of different cultural backgrounds, but they're brothers. So that'll be an interesting through line throughout the show. We saw a little bit of it in Korra. Some people felt cheated because we didn't see that relationship between Korra and Asami flourish. What do you feel about their comments on this? Do you think it is as simple as they're saying? I know a lot of people, they didn't spoil anything, but that doesn't mean necessarily that they're going to be exploring it. And are we setting fans' expectations up too much,
I think they're being cautious with the way they handle it, mostly because of the way Korra was locked down by a child's network. So you can understand why they wouldn't show slightly controversial things that could damage their network, even if it's wrong. And I think they will go all the way out with this kind of stuff with the Dragon Prince.
Yeah.
Just because that's the reason is it's Netflix. Netflix doesn't pull punches. And if Aaron wants to tell a story about a trans elf, then I think that they will tell that story, and they will tell it well and represent everyone to the best of their ability.
Right. And that's something that we talked about early in the episode with our special guests as well, that network tends to have more, people to answer to, and it's been harder in traditional network television for representation to be shown on screen. Even though that's wrong, we understand that's a stupid reason. It's just the way it is, and Netflix has done a better job at representing a diverse selection of topics and themings that are relevant today, from shows like Orange is the New Black to 13 Reasons Why to a bunch of other shows. So if there's going to be LGBTQ representation in any show and in any kind of area, it will definitely be on Netflix. So I feel very optimistic about that.
I find no reason to be worried about that. Like even if it's not like a blatant thing,
yeah,
they'll have something layered in, or a subplot or an episode about it. They'll have, if they've said that they're going to have stuff around it, they'll be enough to represent and like that's what they said they wanted to do anyway. They want to showcase all aspects of life.
Yeah, for sure. All right, just switching gears a little bit as we kind of wrap down at the end here. So we got the trailer today. We don't have that episode, but we know a lot about the details of the first episode. We have a release date, which is September 14th, 2018. We have confirmation that all the episodes are coming out at once, kind of to our chagrin. We didn't like that, but that's what we're getting. So there's that. What's next? We're 2 months out. Do you think we're getting any more?
6 seasons in a movie. Will we get any more? I think we'll get at least another trailer, possibly going deeper into the characters for people who weren't at the panel. I think we'll get a lot more promotion for it coming out with interviews and stuff, which will lead to more speculation from us. And the more information, the better. In some circumstances, like I don't want to get everything spoiled for me, but I like to know a little bit going in.
No, that's great. And I'm excited. We haven't really set a schedule for the podcast yet, but that will come in weeks ahead as we kind of sort everything out. Before we go into the closing, I threw out a poll today, and it's got a good amount of response so far, and I'm expecting more. But as of right now, the question was, which character are you most excited for? Calum, Ezran, or Rayla? Rayla is leading currently with 55% of the vote. Out of the trio, which one are you most excited for?
I'd have to agree with our poll because, we're going to have two perspectives of human life, and to have the already conflicted, somewhat antagonist or anti-hero that we've seen with her, I'm pretty excited for that character and that story arc.
I am too. I think Rayla is going to be a really good character and a big one in the fandom. So yeah, go on our Twitter and take a vote in that poll if you want, and then and follow us. So as we wind down here, I just want to give everybody kind of an update on what we're expecting to do. Again, not all of this is going to happen at once, but we really want this to be a hub for the fans. The fan response has been great, and we're forever thankful so far for everybody's enthusiasm around the podcast. Again, just to reiterate, we aren't affiliated in any way with the show. This is purely a fan podcast. Yeah. But we've got great response from people that work on the team. A bunch of the animators and creative team behind the show are following us, and we're hoping to use that as an advantage and get some of them on here to talk about the amazing things that they do, not only just the show, but about their careers and them as people, as well as information and insight into the show as we get kicked off. So expect interviews. This podcast is going to be mainly hosted through the Anchor app, which gives us the ability to take calls. So in the future, I feel like we're going to do some live events, but also there's going to be ability for you guys to leave essentially voice memos for us to answer on air as well. So I'm really excited about that. But there's a lot of fun things happening with the podcast. We'd like to hear your suggestions, your feedback, and everything. So you can follow us on Twitter at Dragon Prince Pod. POD. You can find us on there, and we're very active and very willing to talk to you. But anyway, thank you again for episode 1. This is the Dragon Prince podcast. My name is Will. I'm here with my co-host, James. Have a great night.
Goodbye.